Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend, John Opalewski. How are you today, John?
Hey Jim, I'm doing better because I had 10 minutes talking with my good friend.
Right on.
And I know that sounds like a broken record, but I mean it. And I'm doing better because we had a chance to chat this morning.
Yeah, same here. It's funny. Maybe this is true. Maybe this is certainly off topic either way, but the older I get, the more I need friends that are my age that
Yeah,
understand.
yeah,
When I was young, it didn't matter just as long as we were having fun and we were killing a deer or catching a fish or, now it's like, no, I need people who have raised kids and have been a grandparent for a while to teach me. I need people who understand what life is like in your late 50s, early 60s, because if I don't have that, I'm not going to get that advice from a 20-year-old. I'll get a lot of enthusiasm and fun. So I I guess like wine and cheese, our friendship's getting better with age, John. That
yes,
may
I think
sound
so.
whiny or cheesy, but you know what I mean by it. So why don't you introduce us
Yeah,
to our topic today? I'm excited about this one. I'm not all of them, but this one is near and dear to my heart.
yeah. So Jim, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to turn the mic around and interview you on a subject that really builds on our last episode,
Yeah,
213, of the leadership shortage and
yeah,
what we can do about it. And you shared some material with me, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I think it was,
yeah,
and I was so excited about it. I thought it's a nice follow-up. The next 2 weeks would be a nice follow-up to what we had talked about because
yeah,
we're very concerned about the I hate to say talent shortage because that doesn't sound right, but
yeah.
the leadership shortage, uh, the apparently that we have observed, and so we've wanted to talk about this because we felt it's such a critical subject. And so, Jim, I'm going to ask you to introduce the subject for today, and I'm going to try to do my best to put your shoes on today and interview you.
Well, this will be hard for both of us. People will enjoy
Yes, it will.
our discomfort with us for the next 25 minutes. Yeah. So what we're talking about today, and I'll just read it, is engaging and incorporating the next generation of leaders. We talk about the shortage, but I don't think there is a shortage. I think maybe if there's a shortage of people willing to make that jump, that commitment,
Yeah,
that engagement. Everybody's fine playing drums on the worship band, or they're happy to volunteer once a month, as being a greeter. But there are people who are vocationally called to ministry, and
right.
I think many of them are looking at ministry as too difficult. And so the conversation today and next week is going to be about helping our generation and the generations just beneath us really engage that 16 through 30, 35-year-old person that goes,
Yeah,
I think I'm supposed to do this, but man, it's hard. And helping us help them to find their way.
yeah. Awesome. So, Jim, in the content today, you talk about five different generations
Yeah.
in our churches that look at life or who can look at life a lot differently. Can you walk us through those real quick? Give
Yeah.
us that. Give us an overview of that.
So the builder or the silent generation, and that would be those who were born from 1925 to 1945. So they grew up in the Depression. That was formative for them. World War II would have been something that was formative for them. Their parents, their families, their communities would have been through World War One, the Spanish flu, known as the greatest generation, the silent generation, the builder generation. Second one is the baby boomers. The guys came home from war and decided to have a family. So 1946 to 1964. Their formative years would have been spent getting ready for, I guess, the Cold War, Cuban Missile Crisis, the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah,
What we were probably 63. We've got civil rights with Martin Luther King in August of 63. So a tumultuous time, followed by the baby boomers. Followed by the baby busters or Gen X, 1965, all the way through 1980. We've got Vietnam, race relations, Watergate. We've got the problems with the media is beginning to become very biased in a sense,
mhm,
politically and socially. We've got all sorts of protests. We've got the Kent State shootings.
yeah,
We've got the race riots in Detroit and other places, Chicago, the Watts riots, the stock market, the introduction of cocaine and crack cocaine into the mainstream, and probably the most destructive force of all, to a person from Detroit, and that is disco music. Probably one of the worst genres in my mind. Although I was led to Jesus by a man wearing spandex pants, so that God can use anything. That's just living proof of that, right? So, and then after the 1980s, or 1980, we get the millennials, 1981 through 2000. So this would be kids, the Gulf Wars, Y2K. The world is going to go back to the 19 or the 1800s, the World Trade Center, internet, video games, the beginning of smartphones, personal computers, where the world is getting smaller, because I can get online as a high school student and I can type, and someone on the opposite side of the world who's also connected to the World Wide Web can now respond to me. And then Gen Z, we've got 2000 to 2020. So that's all of that. Smartphones, especially, COVID, gender, race, politics, anxiety, depression. So all of these would have had the form of sociologists tell us between the ages of 5 and 20, a lot of character and a lot of characteristics are formed in the human mind, the human brain, the human soul, the human condition. So if you're raised during World War II in want and in need, and your parents survived the Great Depression, obviously that frames, we all know somebody that doesn't put money in the bank. It's underneath the pillow, buried in a jar in the backyard, under the chicken coop, that never threw away a thing, that can't throw away food, that keeps, they have a garage full of useless things that'll be thrown away once they die. But that's because they were formed in that time. And then we all know kind of the most recent one where the kids, man, that phone is their life support system. This is their social network. This is their friendships. This is the way they went to school for 2 years. So those are formative things that carry on throughout the rest of a person's life and bring, I think the point of all of that is to say it brings a real difference of perspective. My perspective at 58 years old is very different than someone who's 18 years old. There's 40 years difference between those two. And so I say work, and I mean one thing, they mean another. They say friendship, they mean one thing, I mean another. So as our generation is looking, as the Elijahs are looking at a generation of Elishas, we have to speak their language. We have to understand what they're really wrestling with, the questions, concerns. Otherwise, we conclude dumb things like they're lazy. I love this quote. I believe I have it here. Who said this? I have it in the notes. So yeah, who said this? This is, let's see if we can guess who said these words. The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for all elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Anybody know who said that?
Sounds like the Muppets. Sounds like the Muppets, the old guys in the Muppet Theater, right?
Yes. Well, like you and I. Yeah. That. And Socrates said that over 2,000 years ago. The older generation looked at the younger generation and said, "You don't have what our generation had." And I think this has become, we can almost say this is universal. I remember my son JD, who's been on this podcast, saying, "Dad, was there ever a generation that hated the generation after them as much as your generation hates my generation?" I said, "Whoa, what do you mean by that?" He said, "Well, all millennials are lazy, all Gen Xers are this, all." And I said, well, let me give you an example. My grandfather and great grandfather were in the world wars. My grandfather came home and raised kids who avoided the draft by going to Canada and didn't fight in the Vietnam War. Do you think they might have had some issues? The guy that spent 4 years in Asia fighting the Japanese, and the kid that won't go to ROTC because it's a whatever, and he runs. I mean, long hair and free sex, and this is not what you said is not true, and certainly this is not the first generation that has been misunderstood by the previous generation.
Right. And so, Jim, how does that impact leadership and responding to the call of God to vocational ministry? How help me understand that part of it, because I think what you shared there is so true. One of our good friends has told us that every generation needs to kind of get over itself, like in a sense. But how does that understanding that an 18-year-old looks at life so much differently than somebody our age does, how does that impact calling? How does that impact? What can we take from that and learn and use to address this unwillingness? Maybe I said shortage, but maybe it's more of an unwillingness or a misunderstanding to respond
I think
to
that's
the call of God.
I think there's misunderstandings, and let's start with our generation. When we say, well, hey, we made $12,000 a year and didn't have a new car, lived without health insurance, and slept in a really small home that we could afford. Look at the sacrifice we made. Well, understand this generation has healthcare costs that we never had
Mm,
to face, and
right.
for a season, it's illegal not to have healthcare. You'll be fined money if you don't have the money to buy healthcare. Automobile expenses just in the last few years. My automobile expenses went up 30% from one lease to the next lease over a
Yeah.
3.5 year period. Housing and interest rates. The house that
Yes.
I moved into on a $12,000 a year salary, it would take $12,000. It would take more than $12,000 a year to make a payment on that 780 square foot home now. You say, well, dollars are worth, and people get paid the cost of cell phone, the cost of a computer, the cost of internet, the cost of entertainment, everything has gone through the roof. So to say, I made it and you're lazy if you don't, I think is a misunderstanding. I really think that fundamentally the challenge that this generation faces is different. So our generation says you got to go to college and get a degree. They go to college to get a degree. They owe $40,000, let's say, to $100,000 in student loans because we said a college education is so important. Then they get out and they want to be a youth pastor. They can't
Yeah.
afford to make the student loan payments on what we pay youth pastors. Now, we used to pay youth pastors that much money and they could make a living because costs were different. But my generation gets really resentful when a younger generation says, I need $70,000 a year, health benefits, 3 weeks off. I need a computer that from the work pays for it. I need that. We go, what? We don't have any of it. Well, a couple of things. We didn't need any of that.
Right.
And our one generation convinced the other to do something very expensive to make them qualified. So I think our generation has to understand that just because they're not us doesn't mean they're not us. They have the same
Yeah.
calling we do, but we've made it so hard for someone to be a vocational, an entry level vocational minister in America today. It's a really tough gig. I think the other thing
Yep.
that people have to understand as well is it's just it used to be respected because your first name was Reverend. But
Yes.
how many pastors listening now when you're sitting on an airplane and someone says, "What do you do for a living?" are a little concerned to say, "I'm a pastor."
I'm
We
a
went from
public speaker.
respected, yeah, I'm an author. I say I'm
Right.
an author, so they say, "What kind of books do you write?" Then I can talk about Jesus. I say I'm a
Right.
pastor, and they go, "Oh," and they put their headphones on, or they say, "I don't believe in God," or it. We went from respected in our culture to suspected. How many people
Yep.
want to be a televangelist? When I was a kid, people wanted to be a televangelist. That was like if you're really good at being really good at being really good, you could be on TV. Now it's like all those people on TV, on the radio, in a local pulpit. We went from respected to suspected. So I think that's another thing is how can I be a ministry without being a pastor has become a relevant question. I can't afford to be one. And society doesn't honor that sacrifice. So
Right.
that makes it harder to step in. Doesn't make it impossible. Doesn't mean you don't have a calling. But our generation has to understand the challenges that generation is facing. Instead of saying, well,
Okay.
when I was your age, I slept on army cots in the back room of the church and walked uphill both ways in the snow to the bus stop. Like stop doing that. That's not helpful.
So Jim, in the notes that you sent to me,
Mhm.
you said that the older generation, us older guys, have to believe and invest in the
Yes.
younger generation. Can you
Crucial.
talk about that?
Yeah.
How's that going to move the needle?
Yeah. The solution to the problem, it's not a new problem and there's not a new solution. Elijah needs an Elijah to believe in him, to call him,
Right.
to wrap his mantle around him and say, follow me. Timothy, Titus, they still need a Paul. It's Joshua still needs a Moses. There
Right.
is absolutely nothing new in that. If we think back in our time, again, in our 50s, and I know everybody listening to this is in their 50s and 60s, but those who are, remember the time that someone invited you to speak for the first time because they saw you, they
Yep.
believed in you, they knew who you were before you probably knew who you were, and they became your mentor or your tormentor. They became the person who reminded you of your calling, encouraged you and so forth. And so I really believe like I want to say this the right way. It's a corrective word, but I'm not angry about anything, but I am passionate about this. So it sounds like I'm yelling at my generation. I'm not. But please stop being gatekeepers and start being fathers and mothers.
Mm.
Please stop waiting for someone to be as qualified as you are or you believe you once were before you let people do what they're created to do.
Yeah,
People let you do poorly what you now do well. And it's your
that's right.
turn. It's your
That's
turn
so right.
to let people do poorly on Sunday morning in front of God, their mama, and everybody what you can do like ringing a bell. But your first sermon was not your best sermon. Your first song you led was not your best song you ever led. Your first, closing an altar call, it was awful. We all know that. You had 12 pages of notes and you were done in 4 minutes, just like everybody else. But someone
Yeah.
gave you an opportunity to do it more than once. Because of that, a proficiency grew. So don't be the gatekeeper of perfection. Be the father that understands opportunity will create that. Repetition will create that. And they need an atmosphere. Or when you're gone, your church closes and becomes a restaurant. Those are your two choices. Either get sons and daughters or put a commercial kitchen where the altar is, because that's what's going to happen to your building someday, is it'll be done. And it won't be that generation's fault that your church is now a restaurant. It'll be
Mm.
yours. So was
Okay.
that too mean? Was that too mean? Was that too
No,
passionate? Okay.
no, I appreciate the passion. Um, Jim, I'll never forget the people in my life early on that let me do things I wasn't ready to do.
Yeah.
I'll never forget them.
Yeah.
They absolutely made an indelible imprint
Yeah.
on my life. They were a huge part of responding to the call of God on my life because they saw calling on me before I saw calling on me. And I think, boy, you took a risk putting me up in front of people.
Yeah.
That that was super risky. A lot of things could have gone wrong there. And yet they did that. And so I'm so grateful for the people in my life who did that for me. I want to do that uh,
Yeah.
in with whatever I have left, in terms of life and and
Yes.
and, and usefulness. I want
Yeah.
to do the same thing. Um, Jim, one of the things that's interesting to me is to hear from younger leaders themselves,
Yes.
about this subject. And we uh, we had polled you had polled some younger
Yeah.
leaders
Yeah.
and asked some good questions. And we're going to take one because we're bumping up against time here,
Okay.
and let's
Yeah.
we'll push the other two. We'll push the other two into 215, episode 215. But here's one of the questions that was posed to younger leaders, and I'd love you just
Yeah.
to kind of give me some of their feedback and then some of your thoughts around this first question. Here we go. Uh, what and so here's the overarching question,
Yeah.
and there were three answers to this question. We're going to take one answer,
Yeah.
uh, and then we'll wrap up. What would you say to pastors who want to engage and enlist a younger generation?
Yeah.
What was the first answer, Jim, that came
Yeah.
back?
So I gave this to probably 2 dozen-ish people in somewhere in their 40s, but they work directly with people in their 20s and teens. So that's how the
Okay.
40-year-olds got in there. Everybody else is between 15 years old and 39 years old. And this is the
Okay.
this is the synopsis of the answer to that question. The first one was church growth is not as important as relational connection to this generation of leaders. the
Hmm.
the thing they prize and value the most is not how large the church is, but how deep the relationships are.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So I actually had a church planter say this. I said, so what is your church going to look like? He was a young man, probably late 20s, early 30s. What's your church going to like? Close your eyes and help me understand what you're wanting to do, what God's put in your heart. He said this, I don't know what my church will look like. I only know what it will not look like. It will not look like what has become normal. I don't want smoke machines, Krispy Kremes, and skinny jeans. I want community and depth, not numbers and a show. This last statement's huge. I'm so tired of the Coldplay concert followed by the TED Talk.
Hmm.
And that's an
Wow.
indictment, by the way. That is
Oh,
a so. But my generation can say, "Well, you snot nosed little brat, you have no." Like I had to transition this from suits and ties to hymns and pipe organs and 3 hour long Pentecostal marathons. And now you come in saying it's not what you built. Like, or we can say, well, you need to know more than what your church doesn't look like. You need to know what it looks like. And if you can tell me what it looks like, you can count me in. I'll help you build it. I won't lead it because I'm not qualified to lead it. I'm an old guy. But if you can define for me what it is, where it is, what it does, what it doesn't do, I'm in. And so back to that thought, like this generation isn't really. I need a youth pastor. Well, what do you want? I need people that can really make a large youth group and really connect all of our families. Like, you're just turning off a generation that is so tired of being used like a factory worker building a car for a profit that they don't receive, that they're about to unionize. I mean, so many
Yeah.
youth pastors I know, they're like, wonderful. These would be people at the end of their youth pastor journey and the beginning of their next phase of life. All of them, not one, not 5%, 100% of them are so tired of, I'll quote one, being pimped out for their
Wow.
virtues to for the gain of somebody and what they value, but not in what the youth pastor values. So I want
Mhm.
more numbers, events, numbers, numbers, numbers. What was your number? How many did you have? Not, in other words, they don't care about the base of the pyramid that's being built in discipleship. They care about the height of the pyramid, how many people
Right.
showed up, and they're just tired of working on the treadmill to achieve a goal that they don't even value. So to say to
Mm.
a young person, I want you to build deep, lasting, disciple making, nation changing, risk taking, earth shaking, Holy Ghost troublemaking relationships with teenagers, they'll say yes to that. If you say, I want
Yeah.
more and more and more, because people that tithe here have families and they'll go to another church that has a better youth program, like they're done with that. They don't want to give their life to something they don't value. They value deep relationships.
Yeah.
Another young lady, she said, younger generations hold much more to the idea of you'll know them by their fruit than automatically showing respect due to one's age. Respect is mutual and it's earned, it's not freely given. And the man who disciples a lot of young people in our church says they're not as hungry for amazing results as they are for true, deep relationship with God and with you. They want to be mentored, they want a friend, they want a disciple making relationship, and they want to be released to do that very thing. So,
Jim, hasn't it always been that way if you go back to the gospel?
yes,
It is relational.
yes, yes.
That Jesus modeled that for us so beautifully
Yeah.
and so consistently. And so you said earlier the solution isn't new.
No.
It really isn't. It's coming back to this idea of discipler,
Yeah.
disciplee, father, son, mother, daughter, uh, the relational piece of this. And
Yeah.
so I would just say this as a thought that God is, if you're a pastor, God has called you into the people business.
Yeah. Good.
He has called you into the people business. He's called us into the people business.
Yeah.
And all of us have a variety or a different skill set around relationships. Um, and I've heard some pastors say, "Well, I'm a very shy person, and I'm 5 on the Enneagram, and I like being by myself, and I
Yeah.
understand that I'm a 5 on the Enneagram." Um, but just because you're a 5 on the Enneagram, you still have a calling that's
Yeah.
extroverted. You have an
Yes.
extroverted calling. And so, yeah, it might be harder for you if you're shy to work on this piece, the relational connection piece. Uh, but just because it's hard doesn't mean you shouldn't work on it. And
Yeah.
I am a person who understands the energy it requires to do that. If you are a shy person, to be extroverted, it requires a lot out of you. I get that.
Yeah.
We have to have strategies for filling the tank back up, if that's
Yeah.
somewhat draining for us. But look, if you're a pastor, you are uh, you are called to not only your congregation, you're called to your team,
Yeah. Oh
and you're
yeah.
called to care for
Yeah.
your team and to help them develop and grow. So, Jim, thanks for this.
Yeah.
I'd love for us to pick this up in 215
Yeah.
and keep talking about this. I'm excited about these other two answers
Yeah.
that were given to, or these other answers that were given to you
Yeah.
to this question. What would you say to a pastor who wants to engage and enlist a younger generation? So we
Right.
hope that today has been a blessing to you. We, first of all, we just want to say thanks for watching, listening, for giving us, 30 minutes of your day
Yeah.
to talk and to share and to wrap together. If you're listening or watching today and you'd like to explore this idea with us further, you can go to convergecoach.com and click on the contact us link. And that gives you access to one of our teammates for 30 minutes. for free. And maybe a 30-minute call is what the doctor ordered, and you won't need any more time. But maybe you will need some more time with us. And we want to be here to serve you, to help you. You know, it's always our heart that when you get done listening to one of these episodes, that you have some encouragement, some maybe a little bit of a challenge in front of you, but also some practical things that you can do to move the ball down the field. So thank you for being with us today. We're rooting for you. We're praying for you. We're cheering for you as you continue to lead from alignment.